It was the summer of 1944. Europe trembled beneath the thunder of advancing armies. From the beaches of Normandy to the fields of Belgium, Allied columns rolled eastward, pushing the crumbling Reich back toward its heart. But behind the front lines, a different kind of war was being fought, one waged not with bullets, but with imagination. While Patton's tanks shattered German defenses and Eisenhower's planners charted the liberation of France, another unit moved quietly in the shadows. Their trucks carried no ammunition, their guns could not fire, yet their orders were clear: to make the enemy believe what was not there. They called themselves the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. The men who served in it would later be known as the Ghost Army. The idea of using deception to mislead an enemy was not new. Throughout history, generals had used fake banners, decoy camps, even wooden horses. But in 1944, the United States Army set out to industrialize deception, to weaponize illusion on a scale never attempted before. In January 1944, under the command of Harry L. Reeder, the U.S. War Department authorized the formation of a top-secret tactical deception unit. It would draw its men not from ordinary infantry, but from the worlds of art, design, and sound. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops would combine 4 specialist units. The 603rd Camouflage Engineers, responsible for visual trickery, creating inflatable tanks, dummy artillery, and false camps. The Signal Company Special, experts in radio deception, able to impersonate entire divisions' communications. The 3132 Sonic Company, masters of sound, who used powerful loudspeakers to broadcast recordings of armored convoys. And the 406th Engineer Combat Company, who provided security, logistics, and realism on the ground. Together, they formed a force of just over 1,100 men, yet their purpose was to impersonate divisions 10 or 20 times their size. Recruitment began quietly. Posters never mentioned the true mission. Instead, letters were sent to art schools and design firms across America. The Army needs creative minds for a special assignment. Soon, young artists from Cooper Union, Pratt Institute, and the School of Fine Arts traded their brushes for helmets. Among them were future household names: fashion designer Bill Blass, painter Ellsworth Kelly, and set designer Arthur Singer. When they arrived at Fort Meade, Maryland, the new recruits were confused. They were handed rifles and shovels, but also sketch pads, paints, and rolls of fabric. Their instructors explained little. All they were told was that they'd soon be fighting a different kind of war. Training was short, intense, and unconventional. They learned to build mock tank parks from canvas and rubber. They practiced inflating life-sized M4 Shermans using air compressors. They were taught how to disguise a field of empty trucks to look like a full division bivouac, complete with laundry lines, fake latrines, and vehicle tracks pressed into the mud. They studied radio procedure, learning to mimic the rhythm and slang of real armored divisions. Their operators practiced switching frequencies, simulating hundreds of men chatting across dozens of channels. And then came sound, the weapon few armies had ever used. At an isolated field near Pine Camp, New York, engineers from Bell Labs and RCA helped record the clatter of tanks and half-tracks, the rumble of engines, and the metallic grinding of treads on gravel. Those sounds were captured on massive 16-inch discs. Mounted to 500-pound loudspeakers, they could be blasted for miles, convincing any listener that an entire armored column was moving through the night. What they were building was nothing short of a traveling illusion, a portable army of sound, right, and rubber. In late May 1944, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops crossed the Atlantic aboard Liberty ships. The men were seasick, cramped, and still unsure how their strange talents would be used. When they landed at Cherbourg in June, the beaches were still scarred from the invasion. The smell of salt and cordite lingered in the air. Their first mission came soon after, a deception called Operation Elephant near Normandy. Their task? To impersonate the 6th Armored Division and draw German attention away from the real movements. Working under darkness, the Ghost Army inflated dummy Shermans and M7 priests across an open field. From the air, it looked like a division on the move, rows of armor lined up, command tents fluttering. They set up false road signs, painted unit markings, and left fake tire ruts leading into nearby woods. The signal company broadcast hours of convincing radio chatter, complete with supply requests, coordinates, and fake morale reports. By dawn, German reconnaissance planes spotted what appeared to be a mass of armor forming near the front. Within hours, enemy artillery began shelling an empty field. The deception had worked. No American lives were lost, and the real 6th Armored advanced several miles to the south. For the Ghost Army, it was proof of concept. Their illusions could shape the battlefield. By the autumn of 1944, the Ghost Army had become a silent weapon in the Allied arsenal. Their deception missions grew in scale and ambition, each one a stage performance conducted under enemy fire. As the real armies pushed through France, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops followed just behind the front lines. Their convoys moved mostly at night, headlights blacked out, navigating bomb-cratered roads and wrecked villages. In the morning, they would set up an entire division out of thin air. It began with visual deception. Teams of camouflage engineers rolled out inflatable tanks and trucks, positioning them carefully to match aerial photographs of real armored formations. They hung nets, built fake depots, and used empty oil drums to suggest fuel storage. Then, the signal company special went to work, their radios buzzing to life, impersonating units across a dozen frequencies. They used real call signs and authentic transmission patterns borrowed from frontline divisions. Every detail was planned. Even their voices were part of the act. Operators practiced the slang and tone of men who'd been in combat for months. A listener on the German side would swear he was hearing the genuine chatter of an armored regiment preparing for battle. At the same time, the Sonic Company positioned their giant loudspeakers the size of jeeps along the tree line. They blasted recordings of tank engines, troop movements, and shouted commands, echoing across the valleys. Sometimes they would play for hours, mimicking the advance of an entire column. To the Germans, it looked and sounded real. To the Allies, it was priceless, a phantom force holding the enemy's attention while real soldiers maneuvered elsewhere. In November 1944, near the fortified city of Metz, the Ghost Army performed one of its most complex illusions. Patton's Third Army was preparing a major assault, but needed the enemy to believe the attack would come from a different direction. The 23rd was sent in. For several days, they created the illusion of the 90th Infantry Division massing along a riverbank. They built fake bridges, set up dummy artillery, and even parked decoy half-tracks along country roads. Their signal team sent encrypted messages to headquarters, discussing non-existent supply shortages and bridge repairs. German spotters spotted the buildup and shifted their reserves north, away from the true attack route. When the real assault came, it tore through thinly held lines. The deception had bought Patton the element of surprise. The 23rd moved out before dawn, leaving behind nothing but deflated rubber and boot prints. Then came the Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge. The coldest winter in living memory. Snow fell thick over Belgium, and the Allies were suddenly on the defensive. The Ghost Army was scattered, stretched thin across the rear areas. They weren't built to fight pitched battles, but during those desperate days, they found themselves under direct threat. German paratroopers slipped behind American lines. Convoys were ambushed. At one point, a Ghost Army truck convoy ran straight into a firefight outside Luxembourg. Men trained to paint and build decoys now had to fire real rifles for survival. Even so, they continued their work. When the front stabilized, they resumed deception missions, this time impersonating battered units to keep German intelligence guessing which divisions had been withdrawn or reinforced. Their ghost divisions confused the enemy's maps for weeks. March 1945. The Rhine River, the last great natural barrier into Germany. Every Allied commander knew that crossing it would mark the final phase of the war. But the Germans knew that too. They fortified every potential crossing point with artillery, machine guns, and anti-tank defenses. To breach that line, General Omar Bradley's 12th Army Group needed a distraction, something that would draw enemy fire away from the true crossing sites. Once again, the call went to the Ghost Army. Their mission? Operation Viersen.
Their mission, Operation Weissen. Near the town of Wesel, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops staged the largest tactical deception of their entire campaign. For days they impersonated the 30th and 79th Infantry Divisions, creating a phantom army poised to cross the Rhine miles north of Patton's real bridgehead. They inflated hundreds of dummy tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces. Their sound engineers blasted the rumble of engines and the clatter of pontoon bridge construction. Signal teams filled the airwaves with fake reports about bridging supplies and river crossings. The illusion was flawless. German spotters scanning the horizon saw activity that looked genuine. They redirected artillery batteries to the north, right where the Ghost Army wanted them. Meanwhile, Patton's real divisions crossed the Rhine to the south, almost unopposed. For 3 days the deception held. The enemy fired thousands of shells into empty fields. When the real crossings were complete, the Ghost Army simply packed up their gear and vanished into the night. It was their finest hour. They had deceived an entire German corps without a single casualty on their side. May 1945. The war in Europe ended with the crack of champagne bottles and the tolling of church bells. Across the continent, men laid down their rifles. The thunder of artillery gave way to the quiet murmur of rebuilding. For the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, the Ghost Army, there were no parades, no medals, no headlines. They were ordered to pack up their rubber tanks, fold their camouflage nets, and go home. Their missions remained classified, their achievements hidden beneath layers of military secrecy. When they boarded ships back to America, few people even knew they existed. They couldn't tell their families what they had done. All they could say was, "We helped." Behind those 2 words lay 21 elaborate deceptions, hundreds of sleepless nights, and countless lives saved because the enemy chased shadows instead of men. Many of them returned to their old lives, to studios, design firms, and classrooms. Some became famous names in American art and design. Bill Blass, the fashion designer. Ellsworth Kelly, the abstract painter. Art students who once sketched landscapes now carried the memory of fake battlefields in their minds. They had used creativity as a weapon and illusion as armor. While others fought with bullets, they fought with brush strokes, sound waves, and radio static. In a war built on destruction, they had mastered the art of deception, to protect, not to kill. For more than 40 years, the Ghost Army's story remained buried in military archives. Their reports were sealed, their photos locked away. It wasn't until 1996 that their existence was officially declassified. By then, many of the men had already passed away, their service unknown, their medals never awarded. When the truth finally surfaced, historians realized what they had achieved. They had bluffed the German army 21 times, saving tens of thousands of Allied lives without ever firing a single shot. Today, their legacy lives quietly in museums and documentaries, in faded photographs of inflatable tanks and radio scripts scribbled in pencil. Visitors stare in disbelief. It seems almost impossible that rubber, paint, and sound could win battles. But the record is clear. It worked. Every fake tank that fooled an enemy pilot, every radio signal that misled a German commander, every night spent under rain pretending to be an army they were not, it all led to fewer graves on foreign soil. In the end, they were soldiers of illusion, men who understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon in war is imagination. Their story reminds us that courage comes in many forms. Not all heroes charge the front lines. Some stand in the shadows, unseen, unheard, and change the course of history with nothing but wit, paint, and a little borrowed thunder. They called themselves the Ghost Army, and to this day their echoes still drift across the fields of Europe, a whisper of the men who won battles without ever firing a shot.